Something is happening in Toronto right now that nobody saw coming. After years of bidding wars, after years of buyers throwing their life savings at overpriced condos and townhomes just to get a foot in the door, something has fundamentally changed. Buyers are not just hesitating anymore. They are walking away. They are ghosting their real estate agents mid-deal. They are letting deposits sit on the table and disappearing into the night. And what triggered this sudden shift is something that the real estate industry desperately does not want you to understand. If you want to know what is really going on in one of North America's most expensive housing markets, you need to watch this entire video, because by the end, you will see this market in a completely different way. And if you are new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button right now, because we break down market shifts like this every single week. And trust me, you do not want to miss what is coming next. Let me take you back to where this all started, because to understand the present, you need to understand just how insane the Toronto market became over the past decade. In 2015, the average price of a home in the Greater Toronto Area was hovering around $600,000. Fast forward to early 2022, and that same average home was approaching $1.4 million. We are talking about prices that more than doubled in just 7 years. Condos that sold for $300,000 became worth $600,000. Detached homes in suburban neighborhoods went from $800,000 to $2 million. The entire market lost its mind, and everyone just went along with it, because nobody wanted to be the person who missed out. The fear of missing out became the dominant emotion driving every single real estate transaction. People were making offers sight unseen. They were waiving inspections on properties they had never stepped foot inside. They were borrowing from parents, from retirement funds, from lines of credit, just to come up with down payments that kept getting larger and larger. And for a while it worked. Prices kept going up. People who bought in 2018 watched their equity balloon by hundreds of thousands of dollars without lifting a finger. It felt like a sure thing. It felt like real estate was the one investment that could never fail. But here is the thing about markets that run on pure emotion and speculation. Eventually, reality catches up. And in Toronto, that reality arrived faster and harder than anyone anticipated. The first cracks appeared in early 2022, when the Bank of Canada started raising interest rates. For years, Canadians had gotten used to borrowing money at historically low rates. Variable rate mortgages were being offered at under 2%. People were stretching their budgets because the monthly payments seemed manageable. But then interest rates started climbing, and they did not stop climbing. By mid-2023, the overnight rate had gone from near 0 to 5%. That might not sound dramatic if you are not familiar with how mortgages work, but let me break it down for you. Imagine you bought a condo for $800,000 with a variable rate mortgage at 1.8%. Your monthly payment might have been around $2,800. Manageable, tight but manageable. Now imagine that same mortgage at 6%. Suddenly you are looking at monthly payments of over $4,000. That is an extra $1,400 every single month, money that has to come from somewhere. For a lot of Toronto homeowners, that somewhere did not exist. They were already stretched to their absolute limit. This is when the psychology started to shift. Homeowners who had been feeling wealthy suddenly started feeling trapped. They could not sell because prices had dropped from the peak, and selling would mean locking in losses. They could not refinance because their homes were no longer worth what they had paid, and they could not keep up with payments that were eating them alive. Stress levels went through the roof. People started missing payments. Some started walking away from their mortgages entirely, choosing to take the credit hit rather than continue bleeding money every month. But here is where the story gets really interesting, because what happened next was not what anyone predicted. You would think that falling prices would bring buyers back into the market. After all, that is how supply and demand is supposed to work. Prices drop, buyers swoop in, and the market finds a new equilibrium. But that is not what happened in Toronto. Instead, something strange occurred. As prices started falling, buyers did not rush in. They pulled back. They became suspicious. They started asking questions that nobody had asked during the boom years. Why is this condo still sitting on the market after 90 days? What is wrong with it? Why did the sellers drop the price twice in 1 month? Is there something they are not telling me? Is this neighborhood actually declining? Are these maintenance fees going to keep going up? What happens if prices drop another 10% after I buy? For the first time in over a decade, Toronto buyers started acting like buyers in a normal market. They started demanding inspections. They started walking away from deals when issues came up. They started letting listings sit without making offers just to see how desperate sellers would get. And sellers who had spent years being treated like royalty suddenly found themselves in a position they had never experienced. They had to negotiate. They had to make concessions. And in many cases, they had to accept that their home was simply not worth what they thought it was. The data tells the story better than anything else. In March of 2024, the Toronto Regional Real Estate Board reported that sales were down significantly compared to the same month in previous years. Listings were piling up. Inventory levels that had been near record lows during the pandemic were now climbing back toward more balanced territory. The average days on market, which had dropped to single digits during the frenzy, stretched back out to 30, 40, even 60 days for some properties. Sellers who had expected to receive multiple offers within hours were now waiting weeks without a single showing. But here is the part that really caught my attention. The number of collapsed deals started spiking. These are transactions where a buyer and seller have agreed on a price, signed initial paperwork, maybe even put down a deposit, but then the buyer walks away before closing. In a healthy market, collapsed deals are relatively rare. They happen, but they are not a dominant trend. In Toronto over the past several months, collapsed deals have become disturbingly common. Real estate agents are reporting that buyers are using every possible exit clause to get out of transactions. They are citing financing issues. They are citing home inspection problems. Some are simply disappearing and accepting the loss of their deposit rather than completing the purchase. Why would someone walk away from a deposit? That is thousands of dollars just gone. The answer is fear. Pure, overwhelming fear that they are about to make the worst financial decision of their lives. These buyers are looking at the market and doing the math. If I buy this condo for $700,000 today and prices drop another 10% over the next year, I will have instantly lost $70,000 in equity. That is more than my deposit. It makes financial sense to take the smaller loss now rather than the larger loss later. This kind of thinking was absolutely unheard of during the boom years. The idea that Toronto real estate could go down in value was treated like a joke. People would laugh at you if you suggested it. Housing only goes up. It is Toronto. Everyone wants to live here. Immigration is driving demand. There is no more land. The supply is limited. We have heard all these arguments 1,000 times, and while some of them have merit, they all ignored one fundamental truth. Prices are ultimately determined by what buyers are willing and able to pay. And if buyers cannot afford the current prices, or if they are too scared to pay them, then prices have to adjust. What we are witnessing right now in Toronto is a massive recalibration of expectations. Sellers are slowly coming to terms with the fact that the 2022 peak was an anomaly, not a baseline. Buyers are realizing that they have leverage for the first time in over a decade, and the standoff between these two groups is creating a market that feels frozen in place. Neither side wants to move first. Sellers do not want to drop prices further because they remember what their neighbors sold for 2 years ago. Buyers do not want to make offers because they think prices have further to fall. This standoff cannot last forever. Eventually, one side will blink. And based on everything I am seeing in the data, I believe it is going to be the sellers. Here is why. The wave of mortgage renewals coming over the next 2 years is going to put enormous pressure on current homeowners. Hundreds of thousands of Canadians locked in mortgages at ultra-low rates during 2020 and 2021. Those mortgages are coming up for renewal in 2025 and 2026, and they are renewing at rates that are 3, 4, sometimes 5 percentage points higher than what these homeowners have been paying. For many of these people, the payment shock is going to be unbearable. They will have no choice but to sell. And when a large number of motivated sellers hit the market at the same time, prices have only one direction to go. This is not fear-mongering, this is mathematics. The Bank of Canada has made it clear that interest rates are not going back to pandemic lows anytime soon. Even if they cut rates over the next year, we are likely looking at a new normal of 3 to 4%, not the near-zero rates that fueled the housing boom. That means affordability is permanently impaired compared to where it was during the frenzy years. A buyer who could afford an $800,000 home at 2% interest can only afford a $600,000 home at 5% interest. The math does not lie. Now, I want to be clear about something. I am not predicting a complete collapse of the Toronto market. This is not 2008 America. Canada has different mortgage rules, different banking regulations, and different fundamentals. What I am predicting is a painful correction that will take several years to fully play out. Prices in some segments of the market, particularly condos in oversupplied downtown areas, could fall another 15 to 20% from where they are today. Other segments, like detached homes in desirable neighborhoods with good schools and transit access, will likely hold up better, but are still vulnerable to further declines. The investor class that drove so much of the demand during the boom years is also retreating rapidly. For years, small-time investors were buying condos to rent out, believing they were building long-term wealth. But when you run the numbers today, the math just does not work. A typical one-bedroom condo in downtown Toronto might cost $600,000. At current interest rates, the mortgage payment alone would be close to $3,500 a month. Add in maintenance fees of $700, property taxes of $300, and you are looking at $4,500 in monthly carrying costs. Meanwhile, market rent for that same condo is maybe $2,500. The investor is bleeding $2,000 a month, hoping that appreciation will make up for it. But appreciation is not happening. In fact, prices are going down. So you are bleeding cash flow and losing equity at the same time. That is not an investment. That is a slow-motion financial disaster. These investor landlords are starting to panic. Many of them bought during 2021 and 2022 at